Doctors could be on the brink of a breakthrough.
Migraines.
How to control them. Tame a migraine.
A severe migraine.
Throbbing, recurring headaches.
Given all the noise, navigating the migraine experience can be confusing and scary, but you do not have to do it alone. Welcome to the Migraine Guy Podcast, the official podcast of themigraineguy.com and theheadachreview.com. Now, here's your host.
What is up, everyone? It's Kevin here, the Migraine Guy, bringing you the next episode of the Migraine Guy podcast. If you're new to the pod, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button, and if you're listening on iTunes, please leave a 5-star review with some comments about why you like the podcast or what you want to see on the what you want to hear on the podcast in the future. Those reviews really do matter. They help fellow migraine sufferers find this content because the iTunes algorithm shows that people like this particular podcast, and so it recommends it to other people with similar interests. And since I assume we are all interested in migraine information, that would promote this podcast. So if you're not already doing that, please give me some of that podcast love. All right, I know May was a bit of a sparse landscape in terms of getting the podcast out. There are a lot of things going on, but we are pressing on. June is going to be a lot better. July is going to be a lot better, and the foreseeable future will be much more regular. Let's see, interesting things that have happened in my migraine history. If you're new to the pod, again, this is kind of how we start. I'll give a brief, 5-10 minute summary of the last week or so of my migraine life. Then we hop into some migraine news, of which there has been ample amounts in the last couple weeks with the new migraine medication being approved by the FDA. Then we hop into a migraine tip of the week, and we close out the show by discussing a listener question posed to us on one of our social media outlets, typically Twitter or Facebook. So if you're not already following the Migraine Guy on social media, make sure you do that, because you get to ask questions that can show up in the pod. So this last week for migraines with me, my migraines have just been a little weird lately. I haven't had any debilitating, right? Nothing in that 8, 9, or 10 pain range. So I'm extremely thankful about that. But the symptoms that correspond with the pain with my migraines, for example, dizziness, sometimes inability to think clearly or speak clearly, pressure in my jaw and forehead, all of those kind of symptoms have been much more frequent than the debilitating migraines. And so even the level 2, 3, 4 on the pain scale migraines that are fairly common for chronic sufferers like myself, those have been a little less frequent, but the side effects, the symptoms that I described have been much more prominent, and so it has just made life a little weirder, right? I'm not debilitated by pain, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I can function as though I didn't have migraines at all, because I'm going to have this really bad pressure in my neck and in my jaw. I'm going to be a little foggy in my thoughts. And for someone who's trying to finish up a PhD program like me, that does not help you write your dissertation any better. And my dissertation advisor is a very particular individual, and so if I don't have, my A game when I present him with reading or writing and stuff that I've done, it's going to get chopped up pretty quick, and then I'm going to feel like I'm a dummy. So, just trying to work through some of that, but I am very thankful that I have not had a debilitating migraine in probably, I guess it's June now, so maybe a full 5 weeks. I haven't had one creep into that level 8, 9, or 10 pain range, so I am very, very thankful about that. And if I had any wood in this desk, I would knock on it to hopefully not jinx it. But let's see, what did happen that was really interesting was my sister got extremely sick over the last few weeks. They thought it was one thing, turns out it was E. coli. Not sure what the source was, if it was some of that lettuce that was floating around from Arkansas, or if it was something else, undercooked whatever kind of food that she had. Not sure where she got it, but once she was properly diagnosed, she started on the particular kind of medications that they wanted her to be on to try and keep the the symptoms kind of at bay. I guess the biggest thing you do with E. coli is just wait it out and keep a finger on the pulse of what kind of symptoms you're having, because some are normal and some could be dangerous. But, she worked through that, and then she got an intestinal infection because of the E. coli, and so she was, out of commission for a couple weeks, really unable to do a lot other than just be miserable. And then, lo and behold, she had her very first migraine the other day, and it was a doozy, probably in the level 9 pain range. She was still able to message me. She was asking questions, looking looking for anything she could do to reduce the pain, help it stop, or at least put her to sleep so that she could just, not have to be conscious while the pain is, while the migraine is creating all this pain. And, she was, borderline ready to go to the hospital if it didn't stop by the other evening after it had gone on for probably about a day and a half. But she worked through it, yada yada. Of course, it went away. It subsided, and she was just in awe that people who get migraine may have that once a month. She said it was just the most extreme pain she'd ever been in. It didn't, it was constant. It wouldn't stop, and all the side symptoms that she didn't really associate with migraine, like pain in your neck, pain in your face, pain in your jaw, all the pressure, all of the kind of standard things that migraine sufferers are well aware of. Someone who's never had a migraine was exposed to and really caught off guard by it. And she's my blood relative, so we share genetics, and so I really, really do hope that she does not start to get them at all frequently. I was about her age. She's 5 years younger than me. I was about her age when my migraines went from episodic, very episodic, 2 or 3 a year, to 4 or 5 a month, 5 or 6 a month, 10 or 15 a month, 20 a month. And so I really hope that this is not the next thing for her. I hope it was just a one-off, given all the weird combinations of disease and medications and dehydration issues and all the stuff that was going on with the E. coli and the intestinal infection. So that I really hope that I don't share that with her. We have enough in common as it is, without bringing migraines into it. But yeah, she was just in that, what do I do? I have no idea what's going on. Should I take Excedrin migraine? Should I take naproxen? How much can I take? Should I try ice? Should I try heat? Should I, what do I do? And so I just tried to give her a bunch of kind of standard things, right? Like she was really dizzy, so I told her to have some food that had a lot of salt in it, something like salted cashews or salted rice or something that would be easy on her stomach, but that would help kind of, raise her blood pressure a little bit to help combat the dizziness. And she was on a bunch of medications, and she has other health issues already, so she's already on other medications too, so I didn't feel comfortable without her doctor, right, being consulted to give her a triptan or give her some of the abortives that I've collected over the years that are still good, because I didn't know what the medication interactions would be. And so we were talking about, you could take, X amount of naproxen. That didn't really seem to help. I told her, she could take a couple Benadryl. That's a very common thing for migraine sufferers to get if they go to the ER, for example, and get kind of a cocktail of medications. And so the Benadryl did help. The salt helped her dizziness. And then she took some melatonin to try and get some sleep, because she just, didn't want to be conscious with the pain anymore, which is very often the case. So she got through it. It was pretty rough for her. And then the next day she was like, oh man, I feel kind of hungover. And I was like, exactly. That's what people call the migraine hangover. She's like, yeah, it's like I never fully woke up, and I still have a light headache, but it's totally, ignorable, and I can't really put my thoughts into words. And I was like, yeah, this is what it is. This is what migraine is like. And yeah, so she was really in awe. That being said, let's all cross our fingers that it's not going to become a routine for her. And let's see, we're going to be moving on now to the migraine news segment of our podcast. We're going to be focusing a little bit longer in the news segment than we typically do, because of all of the migraine medication stuff that's been coming out with the injectable CGRP meds. So let's get to that. All right, so this week's bit of migraine news has to do with, of course, the release of the CGRP medication known as Aimovig from Amgen Novartis. This medication, along with others in the pipeline, probably to be released one more this year and then 2 next year, are really focused on the CGRP protein receptor and the protein itself portion of the pain center for the human body. And the interesting things that go along with this medication are that it seems to have very, very low side effects. Now, of course, critics of the medication, or critics of the hype about the medication, are quick to point out that the studies didn't have huge numbers in them, right? Some studies had I think 1,700 people. Other studies had other 4-digit numbers, but people are worried about what it's going to look like when you release the medication to the general public, and you now have tens of millions of people having access to this medication. And those, of course, are justified concerns, which we will get to in a moment. But from the studies themselves, it doesn't look like, apart from maybe some irritation at the injection site because it is an injection that you give yourself once a month, apart from that and some questions about how it's going to be tolerated by pregnant women, are really the only two kind of black boxes about the medication right now. We do know some other things about it, of course, that are problematic in their own right, a little worrying, but also seem to be planned for by the pharmaceutical company. By that I mean the cost associated with the medication. It's been widely reported for at least a year that the expected cost for the Aimovig injectable CGRP medication was going to be something like $1,000 a month to have, and that's with insurance. That's with a decent, big name company insurance plan. And so many migraine sufferers for the last year or so have been worried that even if this is the first migraine medication designed for migraine sufferers, even if there's very, very low side effects, even if all these great things are said, might not even be able to afford it. In order to kind of help resist some of that, Amgen Novartis is offering kind of a trial run for you for free. Now, there are some qualifications to it. You do have to have a brand name insurance company to get this deal, but they will, if you meet all of their qualifications, give you 2 months free of the medication. Of course, the idea behind this is that insurance companies are going to be very hesitant to pay out for a more expensive medication for migraines when there are much less expensive medications out there that are approved for migraine treatment. Your blood pressure medications, your calcium channel blockers, your anticonvulsants, etc. And so the idea is give migraine patients a couple months free to show their insurance company that this medication works much better than what they're using for preventative elsewhere. And hopefully that will encourage and woo insurance companies to pay out for the currently fairly expensive medication. So you can go to Amgen Novartis' website. You can look at the 2-month plan. I'll put links in the show notes, of course, and you can try that out. Of course, you want to make sure that your insurance company also knows that this is what's going on. You want to be clear with them, because you don't want to not talk to them and then in 2 months, when you've seen maybe some great success with the new medication, not have them covered because they weren't paying attention, they weren't alerted to it, or they just don't care. You want to be working hand in hand. You want to have them on the record saying that they're aware. You want to have them on record saying that you haven't had success with other preventatives and that you're hoping that this works and that you want them to cover it. So you got to do some legwork. Of course, it's no easy task ever to be a migraine sufferer trying to talk to your insurance company about paying for treatments. But at least Amgen Novartis is doing a little bit to make that process, a little easier, even though you do have to jump through some hoops. But that's all on their website explained fairly clearly. Let's see. So one of the things that has been floating around on, opinion pieces or even migraine discussion forums has been whether or not it's worth it to try the medication. Lots of people are saying that either they're a little hesitant because it's a new medication and they want to see how it affects the general population, what long-term exposure looks like, as well as being cautioned or counseled by their doctors, their neurologists, that they're not totally comfortable with prescribing the medication because of those reasons that I just said. And of course, to some degree, both of those are very, very legitimate concerns. You want to know how medication is going to affect the general population. You want to know not just how it affects the general population short term, but you want to know long term to see if there are any side effects that are not evidenced in these studies that justify the FDA approving them. All of those are, of course, great questions and great scientific concerns. The one thing that is somewhat odd for me to really give a ton of weight to those concerns has to do with the fact that migraine sufferers are very, very well, perhaps even pros at taking a medication and having no idea what it's going to do to them. Right? The first time I took Topamax, I knew what the side effects were because I read about it online, but I had no idea whether or not they were going to affect me, and they affected me hard. when it came to some of the anticonvulsants I've tried. They affected me hard. They changed parts of my personality. They made me a very angry person for a short amount of time. And all of this was unexpected. All of this was worrying. All of this was stuff that I didn't want, even though I wanted to take the medication because I was trusting my doctor to help reduce my migraines per month, and I was desperate. And so when it comes to this new medication that is designed for migraine sufferers and does have, much higher success than many of the preventative medications, maybe all the preventative medications that we have out there, it does seem slightly odd to say, well, I don't want to take the Aimovig medication because I don't know what it's going to do. When we take lots of other medications, when we really don't know what it's going to do. And so I unless there's real concern, unless there could be some sort of way in which too much CGRP peptide receptor blocker in your system could cause cancer or make you go blind or make you go crazy or something like that, I don't really see what the potential side effects are that are so much worse than anything else that we normally take, and many of the medications that we cycle through over the course of a year or 2 years or a lifetime. So I just can't really give the hesitancy too much credit, but of course if your doctor feels that way, it's going to be hard to persuade them to change their mind, unless maybe you bring this up and you say, well, you've prescribed 9 medications for me over the last 3 years, and this one did this and this one did that, and these ones were like this, and those were all bad, so if this one's not going to be any worse, why can't we try it, especially given that it seems to have a pretty good success rate for migraine sufferers. And that brings me to the final point about the new medications, not just the CGRP receptor blocker that has come out, but also the future ones that target the CGRP activation proteins and some of the other ways in which they're manipulating this system. It has to do with the fact that the studies on average for the medication showed about a 4-day per month reduction on average for migraine sufferers. So if you had 20 migraines per month before, you're getting about 16 on the CGRP medication. And that might not sound like a lot, and in fact you might say, well, what's 4 days a month to me? It's not going to be enough to justify the cost, it's not going to be enough to justify the question marks that I don't have answers to, it's not going to be enough to justify me taking it when I don't know long-term effects. Here's the thing to think about 4 days a month, it's that it's not just 4 days a month, that's 48 days a year. That's more than a month regained every year by this medication if it does work for you on average like it did in the studies. 48 days per month. What would you do if you could have an extra 48 days per month migraine free? Not just, with a level 1 or 2, but just no migraine. Another month. Name it Migraine Month, or name it Aimovig, or name it the Migraine Guy Month or something, right? And just think about what would you do if you could regain a full month and then some without migraine. That's the way I'm kind of viewing this, and given all of those seeming benefits with fairly low risk, I just am excited about the medication, cautiously so. The fact that we don't know how it's going to affect pregnant women really does kind of seem like a weird thing to have not pressed them on from the FDA side, because migraines for women can sometimes either stop when you get pregnant or they can become debilitating when you get pregnant. And so the fact that we don't know how it would affect them is a little worrying. Now the FDA is making them keep extremely tight records on pregnant women who do use the CGRP medications over the next few years. I think 5 or 10 years they have to keep detailed records to see if there are any concerns about it. But that's of course after it was already approved, not before. You would have thought this would be something they would do beforehand. But they did not. So there are, like I said, some legitimate concerns, obviously some things that were not done as thoroughly as we would like, but at the same time, if they had done them as thoroughly as we like, we might not actually be getting these medications for 2 or 3 or 5 more years. So it's always a catch-22, right? We could do more research, but that'll take more time. We can get it out faster, but then we won't have as much research. And so like many migraine medications, we're going to be the guinea pigs. We're going to be the best authorities on how the medication affects us, and I think that we should just be cautiously optimistic about whether or not we should try it. I'll be talking to my neurologist soon. I'll be switching my insurance company actually at the end of July, like I said last podcast, so I couldn't really hop on board with the 2-month trial from Amgen Novartis because my insurance is changing in 2 months, and so all of that evidence might not carry over for the current insurance company because I won't be able to talk to them. So I'm in a little bit of a bind in that sense, but I'm also maybe just going to get new insurance this month anyway, and then we can go from there. So that stuff being said, I think cautious optimism is the justified response to the new medications. And if you've gotten approved or you are still concerned about it, anything related to this topic, I want to keep thinking about it. I certainly haven't exhausted this topic, so please hit me up on social media, Facebook, YouTube if you're there and listening to this, anywhere, Twitter, Instagram. Let me know what your thoughts are on this topic, because we're smarter as a group than I am as an individual, so please let me know your thoughts. That being said, let's get to your migraine tip of the week. So this week's migraine tip of the week was inspired by an article from The Mighty. If you're not familiar with The Mighty, it's a website for people with various health conditions, chronic pain conditions, and various other conditions to write articles like blogs. Some can be more, research-based with footnotes. Some can be more, I'm feeling like this right now, thoughts, and you can follow different authors there. But it provides an outlet specifically for patients who want to talk about their particular condition. They have lots of, subgroups within the Mighty's overall umbrella, so you can find lots of good stuff for chronic migraine. You can also find lots of stuff for various other conditions, so if you're not there, you should check it out. Now, the article that was suggested to me the other day had to do with taking care of yourself even when you are okay. And this seems like a weird thing to say, take care of yourself even when you're doing okay. But the idea behind it was when it comes to migraines, the moment you start to sense a migraine, if you're like me, you start to go into a bit of a panic mode, which of course doesn't really help your migraine. But you start to think, okay, what's going on? When was the last time I, for example, drank water and ate? Is this just a symptom of me not taking care of myself in that regard? No, I just ate, I just drank. All right, what's next on the list? Do I need to go to a dark room? Do I need to get my ice hat? Do I need to find a preventative? Do I need to do X? Do I need to do Y? Do I need to do Z? And I start going through all of these things to help myself avoid a migraine. I start thinking about how can I take care of myself better to avoid the bad consequence. That, of course, is the right way to go. You want to do all of those things to help prevent the migraine. The problem is that the person who wrote the article points out is that when we don't have our migraines, are we taking care of ourselves at the same level? Obviously, it's going to be different kind of taking care of ourselves, but are we taking care of ourselves in the same way that we would if we were about to get a migraine and we're trying to stop it in its tracks? And the reason that's important, I think, or the reason it's important according to the author, and I tend to agree, is that in order to, have a healthy, happy, satisfying, good life, we typically need to do some things to take care of ourselves in various ways, whether it be exercise, whether it be reading a book, whether we, be doing anything with family members, that kind of stuff. And when we get migraines, we typically go into kind of emergency mode to try and fix ourselves. But if we don't have a plan for when we don't have migraines, then that time might be wasted. And I think that's the big takeaway, is that, it's the whole proverb of those who fail to plan to fail. So not that you need to have a detailed plan about what you're going to do every single day you don't have a migraine. Of course, that's crazy. But, having some goals that you can work towards a little bit at a time when you aren't experiencing a migraine is just as important as having a plan for when your migraine's about to hit and you want to stop it from getting worse. People who don't get migraines, people who don't have chronic pain conditions, people who don't have to worry about their health very often, might seem to be able to float through life scot-free and, carefree and just be able to do whatever they want whenever they want. So if they don't get to something today, they can get to it tomorrow. And for them, great, that I wish I could be like that. But when you have a chronic condition like migraine, you don't know that you can get to it tomorrow, because tomorrow could be a level 9 migraine putting you out of commission for 12 hours. So if I have the opportunity to get to something today, I really need to plan to do that in order to take advantage of the migraine-free day, because they are rare. And, it's not even about days, right? Sometimes it's just, well, I've got 4 hours before I have to be at work. What do I want to do with that time right now? Because, in 4 hours I could start to get a migraine. And so it's not even about taking days as the measurement, right? It's hours, sometimes minutes, where you have free time to do something that's going to make your life a little bit better and that you'll be happy that you did. But it's the kind of thing that you have to think about. It's the kind of thing you have to somewhat plan for. And so the idea, I think, was just to provide a symmetry in the article. Sorry, the point of the article, I think, was to provide some symmetry, right? We plan for the bad times. We should also plan for the good times. We should have plans in both cases to try and help make our life better. So, pretty simple point, but something I hadn't really thought about. I hadn't distilled it into words as they had. So I'm going to link to that article from The Mighty in the show notes below. Make sure to check it out. And The Mighty has a whole social media feature to the site, so you can comment on it. It's like a blog, basically, and so you can comment on it. You can talk with the author. You can talk with other people who are commenting on it. So it's kind of fun in that sense. But I will put that in the show notes below. Now let's get to our migraine question of the week. All right, this week's migraine question of the week isn't actually a question. This question section is supposed to be comments, questions, or stories from migraine sufferers. And so here's a story from someone named Nathan Haas. I will put a link to his question on my Migraine Guy page in the show notes below. And by the way, if you do ask a question that way, I assume you're okay with me using your name, just because it's a public Facebook page, and so anybody could see what you wrote. So I don't think I'm violating your rights to privacy in any way like that. But let's see. The question Nathan has to ask is a pretty interesting one. He says, I frequently get what I call migraine scares or migraine sparks, where I see a bright spot of moving light and a small spot in my vision that is very similar to the start of a migraine aura without it turning into full aura or migraine. It varies, but I get these several times a day, some days, and other days don't have them at all. They last anywhere from a couple minutes to just a few seconds. Anybody else notice this? And I do not notice that. I certainly don't have aura, though, so I'm certainly not the best one to talk about this, which is why Gina Fabrizio responded with, yes, I get all kinds of visual disturbances, not always full-blown auras at any given moment. I'm chronic and tractable. I constantly have migraine symptoms, but no matter how many times I experience the visual disturbances, it always scares the she wrote scares the back out of me. I assume she meant to write heck. Scares the heck out of me. I can't even imagine what that would be like to have such constant visual disturbances that I had a nickname for them. But that is just part of living with migraines when you also have aura. What I'd really like to do is hear from more people with their aura, to hear what some of the weirder sensory experiences are. I've had a couple visual auras in my migraine history, never anything like this, and never anything that was constant. It was always, maybe 15 minutes, and then it would go away, and it would just be kind of a blurry patch with some different colors in my visual field, but it wasn't anything that lasted, and it wasn't the kind of blind spot that a lot of people report with migraine auras. So I would really love to hear from you all about what your auras are like, what they do when you're having them, and if you get them like Nathan and Gina do, to the degree that sometimes you just have mild aura with no full-on aura and no migraine to follow. It's just kind of part of how you experience the world. That seems a little scary to non-migraine sufferers, and I know that the first time I had a visual aura, it was very scary, and I know the first time that my office mate had visual aura, he thought he was going to die because he had a patch of his visual field just go blank. He thought he was having a stroke or something. And so it can be extremely scary, but I think one way to make it not so scary anyway is to talk about it openly. So if you have any visual aura experiences, I'm going to make a post on the Migraine Guy page for you to leave your comments, share your stories. I'll also do that on Twitter, so you can leave your stories there, because talking about it from our own experience is one way to raise awareness, and that's definitely a huge part of why we do this podcast, why we do all the migraine stuff that we do, is to raise awareness in conjunction with lots of other people who are trying to raise awareness too. So thank you, Nathan, for the question. Definitely want to hear from the community about your experience with this, because I have very little. Now, that being said, let's get to the end of the show. All right, that's going to wrap up the show. This one's going a little bit longer. I think we're going to break the 30-minute mark. Oh, yep, we definitely have broken the 30-minute mark. We took kind of a deep dive into the CGRP world, so it took a little bit longer than normal. But if you've hung on this long, thank you so much. And again, if you have not already subscribed or left a positive review on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, as I usually do, I like to end the show by plugging our Facebook support group, not because we need more members. We're at 1,200 right now, so we have plenty of people in there. But when you are a chronic sufferer, when you have pain constantly, your life gets disrupted in a variety of ways. Your partner might not understand, or even if they do understand, you still feel like you're failing them. You might feel like you're failing your children. You might feel like you're failing your family, your friends. You might feel worthless because you can't really hold down a normal job, or you can't satisfy all of the conditions for your current job. All of those things take a toll on you psychologically, and all of those things can make you feel very isolated and alone. And one of the most important things for you to remember is that you're not alone, and that's why we do all of the stuff that we do here at the Migraine Guy. That's why we have the hashtag You Are Not Alone. That's why I say it at the end of every show, because it's extremely easy to fall down into just a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where you don't hang out with people because of your chronic migraine, and your chronic migraine kind of creates in you this habit of not being around people, and so you just feel alone. You just think you're alone, and you don't feel like you can really be with people. And that's the great part about the internet. You can connect with people while you're isolated, maybe physically from other people. You can still talk to other people. So we have a support group. It's the Migraine Guy support group. You can just search for it on Facebook. You have to answer a couple questions, and then you are in. As long as you're a real migraine sufferer who wants real support and wants to give real support, you will, of course, be let in. So I say it every week, and I'm going to say it right now. Please remember that you are not alone. If you want to help keep everything that the Migraine Guy does free, then you can become a patron over at the website patreon.com. That's Patreon.com. Patreon lets people contribute funds to other people whose work they value. Becoming a patron does things for me, such as allowing me to buy new products so that I can do product review videos so that you know whether or not a given migraine product actually works before you buy it. It also helps me do things like upgrade the microphones and cameras for both the YouTube channel and this podcast. And more importantly, it helps me be accountable to you, my migraine community. You can pledge as low as $1 a month if you want to, and every single dollar does help. Just head over to patreon.com/themigraineguy to become a patron today.